Good morning, it's Dr. Roy Donnan here. I'm a pathologist here in Queensland, been a pathologist here for 14 years, and before that in South Africa, which is where I trained in pathology, and where I saw a number of late term abortions, including the horrific partial birth abortions. Yeah, I've seen a number of horrific murders and very bad car accidents, with a number of deceased victims. But some of the most horrific cases which stick in my mind today are the late term abortions, and particularly the partial birth abortions. In some of the late term abortions, there seem to be possible defensive injuries. Defensive injuries occur when the victim tries to defend themselves from an assailant, sort of puts their hands up to defend themselves from a club or a knife, and sustains injuries to their forearms, usually hands and forearms. And some of these late-term abortions, there were gouges, cuts that sort of indicated that the baby was possibly trying to defend themselves from the sharp instrument prior to the defending arms being ripped out, and I guess the legs were possibly used to defend themselves before those were also ripped off. And what you get in the lab is just like a mangled mass, head, chest, arms and legs all separate, mangled up with blood and the placenta. Horrible mess, gruesome sight. And then the partial birth abortions, even more horrific sometimes. I remember one particular case. This case was brought in by a very distraught nurse. The baby allegedly had an ultrasound diagnosis of bilateral renal agenesis. That means the baby didn't have any kidneys, and the mother was assured that there was absolutely no chance of life, for the baby. So I think she reluctantly agreed to abortion, but she was pretty reluctant, so she waited until the baby was, basically term. This was a 40-week-old boy. He looked like a beautiful baby boy when he came into the laboratory. There was no signs of defensive injuries or anything like that. The partial birth abortion technique basically entails inducing the mother, getting the cervix to dilate, rupturing the membranes. Then the abortionist puts his hand in, grabs the foot or the leg of the baby, and delivers the body first. So while the back of the head is still exposed, they use a scissor or some other sharp instrument to make a hole in the back of the head, and then insert a suction catheter in, suck out the brain, suck the brain down the suction tube. That collapses the skull and makes the breech delivery much easier. The procedure had gone sort of as planned until he had made a hole in the back of the baby boy's skull. Not hard to do because there's a posterior fontanelle too, and then when they introduced the sucker, there was a sucker malfunction, or the brain was too well formed to go down the sucker, and the abortionist apparently panicked, and he looked for some potassium chloride, which is what they use to inject into the heart of babies to kill them quickly. He couldn't locate any potassium chloride, or it was in another theater or something like this, and so he was panicking that the baby was going to be delivered alive, and the mother was going to possibly hear the baby cry, and that would make her very, very distraught. He told one of the nurses to bring a bucket of water, delivered the baby directly into a bucket of water, and held the baby, basically drowned the baby in the bucket, and only removed the baby once there was no further movement. So we received this boy in the laboratory with this antenatal diagnosis of bilateral renal agenesis, no kidneys, and lo and behold, we found there were 2 normal kidneys, which was a bit of a shock. But when I presented this case to a meeting of the St. Luke's Medical Guild here in Brisbane, a doctor came up to me afterwards and said that he had encountered a very similar case while he was training down south. These things do happen. A very gruesome procedure to see any partial birth abortion. Please don't let this happen in Queensland.